a lot of people have joined, so let's go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for coming to today's IIIF community call. We have just a couple of announcements before we move into the presentation for today. First, I'm just going to put a link to the meeting notes in the chat. So if you could just go there to sign in and let us know that you've been on the call, that would be really great. Let me just so you can go there to enter your name. And then if there's anyone new on the call who would like to introduce themselves, that would be great. I'm Meg O'Hearn. I'm the Community and Events Coordinator for the IIIF Consortium. And I'll just be hosting the call for today and running through some announcements. But if anyone else is new and would like to say hi, we'd like to say hi back.
Hi, I'm Tanya Clement. I haven't been on the community call yet. Tuesday mornings, not good, but I'm glad to be here today.
And Tanya's going to be presenting today along with Sarah Brumfield about a really cool project. So we're super psyched.
And Ben, underrepresented minority.
So I'll go through the some of the announcements just really quickly before we get started to give everyone time to present. The first one is just that we have an upcoming IIIF workshop. It's a 5-day workshop from September 21st to the 25th, and it goes over all the IIIF basics, teaching you how to use the image API and the presentation API, and do some annotations. And Josh just shared the link to the Eventbrite where you can register for the event if you're interested in doing that. That's in the chat. It's also in the meeting notes. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to us at staff@iiif.io. I'm happy to talk. We also recently sent out the call for proposals for our fall working meeting. So the fall working meeting is kind of geared towards getting everyone together to work collaboratively in ways that help move IIIF and the APIs and the different community groups forward. So it's really a time to gather people and collaborate on forming new groups or discussing you know, what initiatives we might start that would further IIIF, stuff like that. So often it focuses on things like recipe building or forming new groups, evaluating a group progress and determining a path forward for existing groups, etc. So if you're interested in proposing a session that you would like to lead during that 3-day event, that would be great. We're going to have a call for lightning talks going out at the beginning of October. So we'll probably do a 1-day kind of introduction to help people situate themselves, update them on the different group statuses, and have a little introductory session for people who are newer to IIIF so that they can jump in a little bit more easily. Have some lightning talks, and then days 2 and 3 we'll be focusing on the actual meetings where people are getting together and working. So just a little overview of what that will look like. And finally, we are updating our code of conduct, which is a code that kind of guides everything that we do in online meetings and in our in-person conferences. So we're looking for volunteers to join the Code of Conduct Committee. It's for a 2-year term. We'll be working in probably October to update the language of the code and make sure that we're still happy with it, see if there's anything that over the past 3 years since it was written needs to be added or modified. And then after that, we'll just be monitoring anything that comes up, any, code violations or, what have you. And then we're hoping to have some people on the committee who are able to attend the in-person conferences should they happen. And I would hope they happen in the next 2 years, but who knows? So we're hoping to have people who could potentially be there on the ground if needed, although it's not a requirement to join. So if you're interested in joining the Code of Conduct Committee, just send us an email at staff@iiif.io. The actual address is written in the notes for the meeting. So any questions about that? None? Okay. So I think that's Josh and Glenn. Is there anything else you can think of for announcements that I missed?
I don't think so. I think that covered it. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So with that, I will introduce Sarah and Tanya. So today, Sarah Brumfield and Tanya Clement are going to talk about a project called AudiAnnotate, and it focuses on annotating audio resources for use in research. So Sarah is a software engineer with Brumfield Labs, and Tanya is associate professor in the Department of English at University of Texas, Austin. So again, thank you both for joining us. We're really excited to hear about the project and for you to share your work. And so I will let you take it from here. I might need to adjust the screen share settings. Let me just make sure that you can. Okay, great.
We can share. Can you see our screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. We're actually going to let Tanya kick us off.
Oh, I'm kicking us off. Oh, and Ben.
Yes.
We didn't talk about this part.
I can go straight into what AudiAnnotate is.
I was like, I need to see the slide. So essentially the work that we're going to show you today is coming out of a project called AudiAnnotate that we, the Brumfields and I got funding from ACLS, which is the American Council of Learned Societies. That's right. And then we're also looking for extended funding, which fingers crossed we're going to hear about any day, with the hope that this project will extend for a few more years. But what you're going to see today is what we produced in a year. The reason that we were doing this project is because of all the challenges that we know we all have with audio in collections and cultural heritage institutions in terms of access. Our extended project, we're going to move into AV, but what we've been focusing on here is mostly audio. And so the challenges that we've seen that we're trying to address are the fact that there's a lot of audio that isn't online and may never be. A testament to that is the fact that there are very few audio materials in Europeana. There's very few audio materials in DPLA. Most libraries and archives have audio materials, but they're kind of a second thought, and they're just sort of listed in a finding aid, but you won't be able to listen to much of it. Also, what is online and freely online often doesn't have a lot of metadata or almost any contextual information, information that scholars like myself would be happy to contribute, but there isn't really a means, a feedback means between people who have the time, resources, and desire to do that kind of work and cultural heritage institutions that are often under-resourced and don't really have the time, the real time needed to listen to audio from beginning to end to add that kind of metadata or context, or even sometimes the metadata frameworks that support those, which is all why we're here using IIIF in the first place. So, but as we all know, IIIF with AV is very new. So a lot of people that do put audio online, even if that is a small number, it's an even smaller number if they've got IIIF associated with it. And we've also found that not only is there IIIF manifests are few, research annotation can be very different from costly transcription and closed captioning annotation. So a lot of people think that the only kind of, quote unquote annotation you want on audio is just the transcript or just the words that people are saying. But there's a lot of researchers like myself who might be working in machine learning, who might be working with languages, who might be interested in environmental sounds. There's lots of things that you can annotate on audio that isn't just a kind of highly resourced, time-sucking transcription of all the words. So we decided that, you know, if we could put the power of annotation into the hands of the people, students and staff and faculty, we might be able to create an ecosystem where there's generated more access and excitement around audio because there would be more annotations available. So the workflow that the Broomfields are going to show you today is basically banking on really great audio annotation tools that are already out there. So Audacity is one of them, and it's the one that we've been using, but really any annotation tool that will spit out a TSV or any sort of tab delimited text file is useful in our workflow. And we're doing it online, obviously, for many reasons. The tool that you'll see is hosted online. Most audio annotation tools tend to be desktop tools because they're very robust and they add a lot of user-needed, you know, widgets and things. And so what we decided would be most useful is the kind of workflow that we're going to show you, which is essentially leveraging these desktop robust tools, taking the exports for them, creating IIIF manifests, taking those annotations, and then publishing all of it online in an easily accessible static web pages. So the people and processes, the Broomfields are who you'll hear from today, but then there's those of us, myself, and we have 2 graduate students that have been working with us and whose work you'll see today. Bethany Radcliffe, who's a graduate research assistant at the University of Texas in the English department and the School of Information, and Kylie Workington, who's an undergraduate research assistant. So on top of the application and sort of the technical work that you'll see, we're also generating workshops, documented workflows, and sample use cases. I gave you a link to one that I'm working on with recordings from Zora Neale Hurston's WPA expeditions that are housed at the Library of Congress and the Florida Memory Project.
So in many ways, what we're trying to do is a radical experiment. We're throwing a lot of different ideas for how to accomplish our goals together. And you may agree or disagree with some, and that's fine. But another way of looking at it is it's just a bunch of glue code. What we think of it is as both. A lot of good code that ties together great platforms and tools that other people create in order to accomplish our goal.
So our goal is to publish useful, easily accessible annotations and the audio that they annotate. And the way that we're doing that is by hosting our audio annotations on static sites using IIIF.
So we were very inspired by a lot of the minimal computing principles. And surprisingly enough, when you design with minimal computing in mind, your actual computing needs are pretty minimal. We run the main AudiAnnotate Web App on a server instance that costs us $5 a month. I actually think we could probably scale it down. It's hard to find smaller instances. So, yeah, so minimal computing. Part of that philosophy and our design was no database. We store all of our data on GitHub. This is an approach that was inspired by a project at the Canadian Women's Writers Project called QuirkWriter. And we were like, wow, you can do that. That's pretty neat. So we took that same approach and we extended it, and we're doing some really neat things with the power of GitHub for our projects.
Now, we don't expect every scholar to be hand coding IIIF in GitHub itself. So this is where the AudiAnnotate Web application comes in. So this is a web app that acts as a bridge between non-IIIF audio, offline annotations, scholars themselves, and static web pages and web annotation sites. So as scholars work through the web app, the projects are published to GitHub immediately. And what that means is that you can create one of these basically digital editions or annotation websites, and then shut off the web app. And the web app will, the site will still be around. So this has implications for sustainability and scalability and preservation, right? Because the actual scholarly output is all in static files on GitHub pages, not running on a server somewhere. One of the other things that means is that any AudiAnnotate instance can read and edit projects. So you can build something on one server, you shut the server down, and a year later you fire up another server somewhere else, and you can resume where you left off. So let's walk through what this looks like. If you go to audiannotate.brumfields.com, you'll see a website that lists all of the AudiAnnotate applications that have been created to date in the world. There's not that many of them. You can log in using your GitHub credentials, and then you can create a new project. So a new project is, this prompts you to enter a title and a slug. And when you create that, what that does under the hood is create a brand new GitHub repository for you under your account and set it up as a GitHub Pages build repository and populate it with a default Jekyll template that we've created, and we'll talk about a little bit more later. So you have a new project, here's where you can get at it. Of course, what we care about is actually publishing the audio. So in order to add an audio file to the project, you create a new item, and this is going to lead you through creating a new manifest. So we prompt the user for the label, a URL to the raw audio file that we assume at this stage in the project is online somewhere in a non-IIIF form, duration, and then a handful of metadata to present about the item homepage, who the provider is. The act of saving that will read all that user input and create a IIIF manifest that is then published to the GitHub Pages site. So clicking on the GitHub Pages manifest brings up a IIIF manifest that's now online, and you could drop into Universal Viewer or any other player. It also, in addition to publishing the manifest itself, creates a human visible static page for this given item that embeds the Universal Viewer, pointing the Universal Viewer at that IIIF manifest. So now you have a site that is online playing a piece of audio that you've created using the app.
So our goal, though, is not just to publish manifests, but annotations. But in our model, annotations are done offline because the best tools for creating annotations are offline. And the workshops that we teach, we encourage people to use Audacity, which is a desktop tool, but we've also done experiments with Sonic Visualizer, and we think there's other possibilities here as well. But those desktop tools often will export their annotations in a tab separated format. So we walk through, when the user goes to the Ruby on Rails application that is AudiAnnotate, and they log in using the GitHub authentication, then they can put in, like Ben showed, the information from the URL for the audio, and then their annotation file. And the annotations are converted into web annotations in a JSON file. And then we push all of that to GitHub and to a static Jekyll site, which processes them when it's built and produces both links to the IIIF manifest, links to the web annotation files, but a human readable static site as well for each of those files. And that's pretty much what I just said, so I'm not going to go back over this one.
So we should talk about the Jekyll template itself a little bit, because it is potentially useful outside of the AudiAnnotate web application. So all of the actual data that's been entered by users or uploaded lives in IIIF v3 manifests and web annotation files that are stored in the data directory on the Jekyll site. Then we have layouts. One of them we've seen a screenshot of includes one that embeds the Universal Viewer to actually play audio. And then we use data tables to display annotations and to link those to the audio files themselves. So this template, this theme could be used without the AudiAnnotate web application itself. All you have to do is kind of structure your existing manifests and web annotations in the same kind of directory format, create a couple of stub files that point to the appropriate manifests, and you're good to go. And so what we'd like to do is show you an example from our undergraduate research assistant, Kylie Workington, who has a real world use case that she's using this for. So this is a video that's going to be about 6.5 minutes long. I'm going to do some fast forwarding in the middle.
This video will show you how to add different annotation layers to your AudiAnnotate project and possible uses for these layers. Once you've created your manifest, you can now add annotation layers that correspond to the audio. You can do this by typing in the label of the annotation layer you'd like to add, attaching the tab-separated file, and clicking Add. Each file you add is one annotation layer. I'll use my experience working with this Margaret Atwood 1974 poetry reading from Spoken Word Montreal to explain the possible uses for these layers. I was tasked with running different recordings of poetry readings from Spoken Word through Jekyll, here, an open source four-cylinder built on Colby's acoustic modeling, and providing high-level description of instances where Jekyll's transcription failed so it can later be improved. These poetry recordings are uniquely useful for Jekyll because they're noisier and more complicated than a typical clean, one speaker at a time recording. For example, the Jekyll transcription of this Margaret Atwood recording here picks up on the conversations of the audience as they move around the room and find their places, side comments by Atwood and with Francis, another speaker at the event, Atwood's reading, and a Q&A segment with multiple audience members who have varying levels of access to the mic. However, though I don't have the same vocabulary as a sound engineer or programmer, my descriptions still need to be understandable and useful for all. By organizing the different features of the recording into separate annotation layers, I can use AudiAnnotate to share my descriptions with other researchers so they can hear and parse for themselves the features of the recording I'm describing. Here I have the text file of all the different annotation layers I created for this Margaret Atwood recording. In the first column, I have the time in seconds of when the feature I'm describing begins, and the second column, when it ends. And of course, if this is a point annotation, they will have the same time as shown here. And in this third column, I have all the different types of annotations I created for my task: the S layer, E layer, M layer, and T layer. The S layer stands for speaker and describes the different speakers in the recording and when they change for speaker diarization purposes, as shown here in this annotation. The E layer stands for environment and describes the different noises of the recording. For example, as shown here, this layer might feature mic feedback, laughter, coughing, pages rustling, anything like that might be featured in this E environmental layer. The N layer stands for notes and describes notes about the recording itself. For example, some recordings feature cuts, as I note here, or may have been recorded over with another recording, thus impacting the quality of the transcription. The T layer stands for transcription and pairs the incorrect Jekyll transcription on the left side of the equals sign, as shown here, with the correct form of the transcription on the right, as shown here. If there are parentheses, which you may see throughout this layer, it will usually note something about the transcription, for example, the addition of a syllable. I then used OpenRefine to separate these annotation types into individual text files that can now be uploaded in AudiAnnotate as different label layers. I'll start with the S layer. First, I'll label the layer, so this will be called the S_ layer. The underscore will help me whenever I use the annotation table later in the GitHub Pages site. And then I'll attach the S annotations file and click Add. You can see in this screen here that the layer has been generated in the AudiAnnotate site. Here's the timestamp, the text of the annotation, and the label layer. So here we have the S layer. At the top of the screen here, you can see the status button that shows the status of the GitHub Pages site. Now it shows that it's ready, so click the link here to view it in the GitHub Pages site. And we can see that GitHub has now populated the annotations table with the S layer. So now I'll go back and add my E layer, following the same process as before.
And we're going to skip over the additional layer adding.
Oops. Oh no, that's not what we wanted to do.
Let's go back and replay.
This video will show you how to add different annotations So right now it's listed chronologically, but I can click
650.
this arrow and it'll sort of reverse and described. So for example, we'll go to this Margaret Atwood speaking annotation in the S layer at 1:30, and we should hear Margaret Atwood speaking. You can also sort these different annotation types. So for example, right now this header says time and it's sorted chronologically, so from 0 to 100. I can click this arrow and it'll sort of reverse. You can see the end of the recording is listed at the top now. The same thing applies for annotation, but it'll be alphabetically. So right now it's listed chronologically, but I can click. It's now sorted alphabetically ascending and alphabetically descending. The layer header can also be sorted alphabetically. Right now it's based chronologically on time, but I can click this and it will sort from E to T and now from T to E. You can also search within these different annotations. So let's say I wanted to look for laugh in all the different annotation types. I can type laugh and it'll search in all the different annotations, pulling up laughter. If I wanted to search within the individual annotation layers, I would type the layer label. So same thing if we wanted to use laugh, E_layer, and you can see where the underscore is now useful, space, and laugh. Now we get laugh, but in only the E layer instead of all the different layers as we have done previously.
So that was kind of our in-depth use case and demonstration of all the different capabilities of AudiAnnotate as it stands now. This semester, we're working on a number of enhancements to the project. I'm going to skip here. A lot of what our student assistants are working on right now are collaboration-based scenarios. And because GitHub is a collaboration tool, generally for coding, we have a number of scenarios that we're working on documenting that use GitHub's forking and pull request approach for these projects so that two people could work independently and then merge their work together. And then because GitHub supports organizations where multiple people can work on the same repository, documenting that approach. Both of these kind of you get for, I mean, put it in quote, free, right? Because we're leveraging GitHub's capability. We're also hoping in the future, and this is not part of this in the scope of this particular funding round, but to do some search APIs.
Yeah, that would, the goal is to leverage the GitHub search API itself to allow, say, a content provider to search for any scholarly annotations on one of their manifests.
Right, but to do that, we obviously need to support existing IIIF audio manifests. We actually, our original development was for ones that didn't have IIIF audio manifests because most of the use cases that our team brought to the table were not ones that were currently published with IIIF. So adding that support in so you can just drop in a IIIF manifest and do the same workflow that we showed. We also would like to have the ability to create placeholder manifests for restricted or offline content. As Tanya talked about earlier, there's a ton of offline content in audio and it may never be online, but that doesn't mean that as a researcher, you're not doing annotations of it and taking notes about it and the timestamps things show up and that you wouldn't want to share that or publish that. We'd also, when we get to the point where we have a IIIF player that supports both audio and authentication, we'd like to be able to support restricted material, but we're kind of not, there's not, I don't even know if we have any audio that's under that has IIIF authentication in front of it, but very little even if we do. We also are working on some import helpers to simplify finding the audio file URLs. Right now we tell people to go look at the source of a web page, which is not a very user-friendly thing to do. And we have some new graduate students that are starting to work with us who have a lot of video that they really like to work with. So we're exploring supporting video as well. So that's what we had for you today. We're happy to answer questions. And there's some links here to the code and the project itself, and you're welcome to walk through one of our virtual workshops and play with AudiAnnotate yourself. And we're happy to chat.
And there should be links to all of these in the meeting notes from today.
Maybe you should move that up. Yeah. It's in the meeting notes.
Yeah.
So questions, anybody?
I don't really have a question. It's Tom here. Just that's awesome. Awesome stuff. Looks really beautifully simple and nice. Yeah.
Thank
Not
you.
a question.
We appreciate that.
This is Peter Winkley. If I can, oops, let me get my
We can hear you.
microphone down. Yeah, if I can just jump in. It's really cool what you're doing, that you're doing this in a mini comp style. And I wondered if you had thought about potential integration with other projects like Wax, which do IIIF images in a static way. And is there scope for bringing these kinds of projects together in such a way that their implementation at the IIIF level is consistent across them to be a guide to how to do this kind of project as we expand the range of IIIF coverage and static annotations thereof?
That's a really interesting question.
So I did have notes that I didn't say for some reason, that we were very inspired by Wax and Ed, which is a digital minimal computing digital edition theme in Jekyll.
Yeah, I think so. So the interesting thing that we've found, is that GitHub very, very recently introduced a feature that is still in beta that allows you to constrain your searches based on how repositories are tagged with a topic. And that is what we use to show all existing AudiAnnotate projects. And that's what we hope to use to be able to search, say, all existing AudiAnnotate created annotations to be able to pull back manifests that are relevant. You're essentially doing a code search using these kinds of filters. It would be interesting if there were other projects that were also publishing web annotations on GitHub pages, if we could come to an agreement on things like these keywords that say these are web annotations, or these ways of searching within files. And QuirkWriter did something like this because they were creating an editor for TEI documents. And they were doing their work before the introduction of the topics in GitHub repositories. And so they had to kind of create marker files, right? That what you really need is a way to say, I don't want every single JSON file in existence on GitHub to be searched. I want just the ones that are web annotations, or just the ones that are IIIF. And so having conversations with projects like Wax or other projects about maybe standardizing these kinds of things, maybe coming up with shim applications to act as an interface between some more official IIIF annotation discovery engines and APIs and the underlying GitHub search API that we're trying to leverage, might be really fruitful.
Yeah, no, that sounds interesting. Thanks. This looks like a wonderful project. I'm going to go explore it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And there's a question from Rafael. Actually, there's a question from Glen. How close is the search of audio annotations to IIIF search? Do you currently search using the GitHub API? So I should say, again, our plans for doing annotation search are in the future. We have not actually built this yet. We're really excited about it, obviously. That's why we're talking about it. So we are currently searching using the GitHub API. And like I said, we might want to create a shim that does more of a content search API between the two of them. But right now, again, we don't have that shim.
So the other question was about Audacity, which we skimmed over in this presentation because we figured of all the things we had to talk about, that's the one you were perhaps least interested in. So Audacity is a desktop tool for editing audio and doing a lot of kind of really rich things with audio. We use their labeling system to do our annotations. If you go to our website, the AudiAnnotate website, and you look at our workshop, there's a video of actually doing that labeling for one of these Margaret Atwood files. and it'll show you kind of how we did it, how you export the labels. You know, one of the challenges we ran into is you can do multiple layers, but it just kind of exports them as one file without a lot of differentiation. So we're looking at some ways to make that better for our researchers. So yeah, AudiAnnotate can directly import the output of Audacity. Audacity just gives you a tab separated file.
Right.
It's not that fancy of an import. But the cool thing about that is Audacity gives you a tab separated file, but what the video demo, what Kylie was doing also was a tab separated file that came out of Jekyll. So these are separate analysis tools, and because we love standards, that's why we love IIIF, but tab separated files are about as standard as you can get, and being able to support something that just has a start timestamp, an end timestamp, and an annotation is pretty great.
Any other questions?
Yeah, if I can follow up on that last one. What Kylie did was use OpenRefine to split the one TSV file into multiple, one for each layer. Is that something that has to be done, or is it?
Currently it has to be done. One of the things that we hope to add this fall is the ability to add just an extra column that lists what layer is in it.
Yeah.
We originally built AudiAnnotate to support ingesting files directly from Audacity, and Audacity only exports one layer at a time. So Kylie was working on a spreadsheet program, and so she was using OpenRefine to split things out. But we have an open GitHub issue to track adding a layer column to those files.
Okay.
Yeah, and Audacity's funny because you can actually split out the layers in Audacity as you're working, but if you export it, it just dumps it all, it aggregates it and dumps it all in one file and disregards your layer. You can even name the layers. It makes you feel like it's gonna spit it out in a way that is helpful, but it just aggregates them rather than allowing you to keep that.
But Audacity is open source, so one of the things that was on our horizon is maybe we can do a pull request to export different layers and different files, or to at least label the layers. We don't know, something that makes sense, right? So,
or to export from Audacity as IIIF annotation lists, annotation pages.
That would be lovely.
But you could also just, put it into AudiAnnotate and then go grab your file off of GitHub.
I mean, the challenge with exporting from Audacity and IIIF annotations is, what do they target?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's an offline desktop tool. Right. We actually were looking at the very beginning about referencing online files with a tool like Audacity, but and this is, I think, where a lot of the challenges come in, is doing that audio analysis online is hard, right? I think I don't know, maybe you, Tom, know more analysis tools, but we really didn't find any that would let you do a lot of online annotation.
Yeah, you need to know what your canvas is before you go to do anything. Yeah.
It's a chicken and egg problem too when you're trying to be cutting edge and there's not that many canvases with audio out there yet.
I guess that's all we have. So back to Meg.
Well, thank you all for presenting. That was really, really wonderful. And I'm excited to share the recording with people so we can let more people see the work that you've all done. So thanks again to Ben and Sarah and Tanya. We really appreciate it. And we will add the recording to the notes for the meeting if anyone wants to share it with anyone else who might be interested.
Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
All right, bye.